We do this quick again.
Yeah. I call this meeting to order at 12:16 p.m. Vice President?
Here.
Director of Internal Affairs?
Here.
Director of Finance?
Here.
Director of Legislative Affairs?
Present.
Director of Student Technology? Here. Director of Outreach, absent, excused. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
I motion to approve the agenda. I second.
Moved by Alicia, seconded by Moira. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion passed unanimously. Approval of the minutes, they have been sent to you.
I motion to approve the minutes.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved by Moira, seconded by Ben. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion passed unanimously. Now is the time for public comment. Thank you and welcome to those members of the public who are present in today's meeting. This segment of the meeting provides the Executive Board an opportunity to hear new concerns and new perspectives on current issues related to the UW Tacoma student body. The Executive Board will neither discuss nor debate topics raised in public comment. This is not because we don't value commenters' perspectives, but to ensure any related action is taken transparently before a duly notified public at a future meeting. However, directors may ask clarifying questions of those giving public comment or request to meet to gain further insight after the meeting. In addition, ASUWT is committed to fostering a constructive and respectful environment in these meetings. As such, we kindly ask that all remarks made during public comment reflect professionalism, respect, and come from a place of mutual understanding that we're here to all advocate on behalf of students. With that, I begin public forum, in which we have no members of the public present. Moving down to, but Emmanuel's on the team, so we're chilling. Do you want to say anything, Emmanuel?
Hello.
No? Just hello?
Hi.
Cool. Okay. Now moving down to new business or unfinished business, we have none. New business, in which we have an executive session. And we are now about to enter an executive session as defined by RCW 42.30.110 and Section 205.02 of the ASUWT bylaws. An executive session is a closed meeting that allows the board to discuss specific confidential matters such as personnel matters, legal matters, negotiations, or HR-related matters without public presence. The purpose of this is to ensure candid and protected discussions. During this session, the board will be meeting to discuss ASUWT hiring for task forces. After the board concludes discussion, we will reconvene in an open meeting. Note this is only for discussion and votes will be made publicly and transparently in the meeting. With that, I ask for all members of the public to leave the room to allow for executive session to begin. All right. We have reconvened after our executive session. Is there any motion or action to be taken after the session?
I motion to appoint Ray Watkins to the Food Equity and Basic Needs Task Force.
Second.
Moved by Nora, seconded by Ben. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion passed unanimously. All right, now we move on to our second order of business, which is a discussion of the university budget from UW-Tacoma Finance Administration. If you want to take a moment to introduce yourself, and if you have any materials that you'd like to show on the screen to the board, I'm happy to get that set up as well.
Oh, great. I would like to go to our website.
Yeah.
And first, I'll introduce myself. All right, I'm Cherie Berthon. I'm the Associate Vice Chancellor for Planning and Budget and work in the Finance and Administration Office. And I am thankful that you gave us some time on your agenda, to talk about our university budget process and what we're seeing going into the next year, where, as you can imagine, we're planning for 25-26 right now. And I will say, you won't be surprised, reality is changing hourly on how federal developments might be affecting the university's budget as a whole. And things are continuing on schedule, but we are also all very aware that the changes in federal funding and the federal administration may have bigger impacts that we will be better understanding over the next few months and could change the planning we're doing now. But thank you. If you would go into planning and budget. And great. I just want to draw your attention to the fact that this page has a great deal more information than we'll go through today. But if you would like, after we have our time together today, if you want to dig into any of this, you're welcome. Alicia has been on the Budget Advisory Committee for our process and has been excellent to have at the table. And Sylvia James, who's our Vice Chancellor for Finance and Administration, have had a pleasure of meeting with Alicia and having longer discussions around budget and planning. I'd like to start with a question about what I think is useful, you also would think is useful. We have a couple of slide decks that are posted here that were used in campus-wide budget budget conversations, and I was thinking of walking through a few of those key slides, and then essentially giving you, but I am also open to just listening if based on what your priorities and needs are. Okay.
It's up to y'all. If you guys have any specific questions or thoughts related to the university budget and how money is spent, this would be a good opportunity to ask, or if you guys just want to sit and listen, that's fine too.
I do have a question, but
Sure.
I'm gonna hold for a second.
Okay, would it be helpful if I did a few slides, and then that might give a foundation for more conversation and questions? So that kickoff slide deck, perfect. And this is much longer. We don't need to go through all of this, but it is there if you do want to go through it. And I was going to say, is there any way I could?
Yeah, I'm trying to see if there's some clicker or wireless mouse. Yeah, if you'd like to, the mic is right here, just so the people watching live can see it.
Great. Thank you. This works out well. And the keyboard. Okay, here we go. All right. So again, I'm Cherie Berthon. Oh, okay. That'd be great if that's no problem. Okay. I will
It might
just.
not work with the PDF of slides, buddy.
Oh, thank you for noting that.
Yeah, sorry.
So those of you who've been involved in campus for a few years or involved in student government for a few years may know that our campus has been on what's called enhanced monitoring. And that meant that UW Seattle was scrutinizing our budget and our spending a little more carefully than other schools or units, although there are a number of other schools and units that are also on enhanced monitoring. And that came from an extended period of having planning budget expenditures that didn't necessarily have that may have been exceeding our projected revenue. And so there have been a series of steps over the last few years to reduce expenditures. That, along with our first enrollment increase that we saw this year, we see ourselves in a much more fiscally stable situation going forward. And we do anticipate getting out of enhanced monitoring at the end of this year. I'm going to skip a lot of the slides that are sort of context and give you a sense. We're anticipating about 28% of reserves at the end of this year of our total budget. I just want to quickly talk about the key budget impacts that our campus and any university have. The increase to salaries and wages of employees is always a major impact on the budget, as are our benefit increases or decreases. The rate of the tuition or operating fee, of course, as you can imagine, that impacts our budget. And it, of course, correspondingly, if enrollment goes up, the revenue goes up, and vice versa. Another area of where our budget is challenged that is not as well known is that when the legislature or the University of Washington Regents authorizes, say, a 3% pay increase, they provide about 60% of the cost of that pay increase. The remaining 40% we have to find through local funds, so either tuition or other sources of revenue. And what that means is, particularly in tuition, is of course the largest share of revenue. And in years where our enrollment is going down, if increases are authorized, we are having to reprioritize to offer those. So there's approximately over 500,000 each year, the last few years, that have had to be found sort of locally. And this going into next year, we have more optimism that we're starting the year off not in a deficit, but in a positive position. However, we're still planning some cuts because that is the only way, is basically reprioritizing is the only way that we can have the discretionary dollars to invest in priorities and new initiatives. So I want to pop into a summary of first on revenue. So this is again looking ahead a full year to the 25-26 year. We are anticipating approximately $92.3 million in revenue. And we see a small increase in state funding, but we don't anticipate a lot. There is a larger increase in tuition because we are assuming a 3.5% enrollment increase. And we know that the legislature has already authorized a 3.3% tuition increase. That does increase the amount of revenue available. Other sources of revenue, like summer tuition and some other operating revenues that are more fee-based, are not large changes. They're fairly flat.
While you're on
Yeah.
state budget,
Sure.
This is actually probably the perfect opportunity for me to ask this question. So I'm the Director of Legislative Affairs.
Oh, great.
I know that the council presidents, their top priority this legislative session is adjusting the fund split with the state. How might that potentially affect this budget if that is something that could be passed if we receive more state funding and we're not having to rely as much on tuition dollars for some things?
Great question, and that is exactly what this whole area is about. If we continue to get only 60%, we have to assume we'll fund about $680,000 ourselves. If we get 100%, that would free up about $680,000 in the budget for other purposes.
Right.
And we will have a better sense of that. One of the reasons this is all, it's so early right now, partly because the legislature's just started, and they will actually set the budget that determines our final budget. Likewise, the Board of Regents has to approve any of our local proposals. But as I mentioned before, this federal sort of chaos has created a degree of uncertainty that I don't think anybody's seen in the last decade or so. I mean, I suppose COVID brought a lot of uncertainty around things, but that because UW is, it's interesting, if you may be aware of this, here at Tacoma, we obviously don't have a lot of research, and we are about like this split here, about 60% reliant, we're about 50-50 between state and tuition. However, UW Seattle is in the billions in research and other forms of federal funding for medical. So as a whole institution, the financial risk, if there are significant changes to federal funding, are tremendous. And so it's really creating kind of moment by moment system, I would say reality, where everyone is knowing that we're doing some planning now, and we're planning, we have no solid information to go on, so we're moving forward, but we know that it's very likely March or April, we may have marching orders that our former assumptions need to be changed. So we could come back at that time to talk about that.
Recognizing that everything on the federal level is changing on an hour-by-hour basis, I assume that the finance administration team, both here at UW Tacoma and at UW Seattle, has been thinking about contingencies of what if.
Yes.
But in the case of UW Tacoma, since most of that federal monies are impacted at the Seattle campus, how do we see that trickling down, the impacts of that trickling down to UW Tacoma that we could begin to be aware of as a possibility?
There are some actual direct impacts. We've been, since the Office of Management and Budget put out its federal order that it was going to stop all federal payments, and some recipients of federal grants have gotten direct orders to stop spending, stop work. Since that time, we have been looking at how we have some employees here at UW Tacoma who are on federal money. We also have a number of graduate students on federal grants. So we are looking very carefully at do we have any federal money now, or is this federal money on a reimbursement basis where if the funds stop, we're actually out of money yesterday, or are there any awards that have already been where we have some money to work with? So we are looking at for example, things as simple as one of our leaders is looking at potentially a federally funded position. That person happens to also have a vacancy on state funds right now, and so is kind of looking at holding that vacancy a little longer to understand. So there's a lot happening right now. I'll also say that Seattle could impact us if they see such a significant impact to the overall operations. It's possible there could be expectations that there are things like no pay raises next year. There could be even expected cuts. I can't say too definitively, but that's the kind of thing I would expect if the situation gets more dire.
Thank you.
Sure. And so then our expenditures starting point, we currently have, for the year we're in right now, an operating budget of about $89.6 million. And so we are trying to calculate what we know we will have to cover next year, assuming things proceed as we thought they would before this week. We have about $2.7 million in contractually obligated wage and merit increases. Some of that is not directly related to wages, but might be related to contracts with unions and things like that where there are changes. But that's just a lump sum. And then we do hold aside a little bit, assuming there could be a benefit rate increase. And then the only other aspect is we are charged by the university as a whole to use certain central systems like Workday and HRP, which is our human resources. So and that is the estimated increase in those charges. And then we, as you may know, we did receive student support funding for student affairs to hire more staff. And instead of that being ongoing, it was made one time for last year and this year. So since we don't have a guarantee that it's going to continue next year, we are asking, you might know that that's one of the things Kurt's especially working on, is that we backed it out. Just in case it goes away, we take out those expenditures. So that puts us heading into next year at a slightly, 26,000 is really just a drop in the bucket of a $90 million budget. But it gives you an idea that with our current projected revenue, we think that we will cover the key expenses. But because we are basically just breaking even, the administration locally, our chancellor has decided that all units needed to put forth 0.75% cuts, so less than a 1% cut. And those were brought forward about 2 weeks ago and are being considered right now. Budget Advisory Committee had a chance to, oh no, they did not weigh in on cuts. They just weighed in on ads, excuse me. But the leadership will be looking at those cuts and determining whether they should or will take them all. Chances are, if they do take them all, those would be the available resources to reallocate to emerging priorities. And that, I think, is all that I need to cover on slides at this time. And I would just like to quickly, I will step away from the, sorry about that.
No, you're good.
Okay. What I would just add from there is that the Budget Advisory Committee has been meeting, I think 3 meetings so far. They've had a chance to see all of the requests. So schools and units were allowed to put in requests for funding, much like they do to you. And now the Budget Advisory Committee has been looking at those, rating them, giving feedback, and then discussing them. And all of that will go to leadership. Ultimately, it is the chancellor's prerogative to set the budget, but she has asked for feedback both from the Budget Advisory Committee, and I know part of our budget process is to be meeting with you and getting your feedback as well. And having Alicia participate has been very helpful. So I think I'll stop there and see if there are questions, and I guess we've talked at a very high level, but any thoughts, feedbacks that you may have that I can share with our leadership.
If no one has questions, I'll ask questions.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. I don't know if it was included in your presentation, but is it possible for student leadership to see line items of what's been, I know Alicia has been very involved with this process,
Yeah.
but for a broader student perspective, being able to see line items and who's requesting what, is that something that's possible?
We have asked that the committee maintain those in confidence, not just from students, but from everyone on campus. There are some position-related requests there as well. So I can't say that is something that I can offer, but I can say that as we get closer to actually having decisions, and maybe I will note this and see what I can pull together in a summary format versus line item. I should be able to do something that's a little bit less granular, but more of a summary. But at this point, it's a great question and it's an obvious question. Yeah, and so, but sometimes
Absolutely.
I feel like my brain is a little over stimulated with all the federal and the number of deadlines we're working on right now. But I think that's an excellent question, and I will get back to you about what kind of summary I can provide. I know at the very least I can provide a lot of detail on what the final decisions were, but I think there should be a way to provide some enough of a summary that you have a sense of what needs are being brought forward, what kinds of needs.
Thank you. Second question is seeing how our how our country's president has been threatening funding in relation to universities who do have DEI related initiatives. Has there been any discussion of, while UW Tacoma doesn't necessarily receive as much federal funding as UW Seattle, do we foresee the UW system caving and getting rid of these programs to appease the federal government, or can students feel safe knowing that those programs will continue to be funded for the foreseeable future?
I feel I can't speak on behalf of the whole university and where those decisions will lie. I can say that there is a website that's been made public to share for staff and anyone interested updates as they're coming along and how the university is responding. But I feel I can't speak on behalf of where the decisions will land. I know that the intention, especially locally, is to be as protective as possible, especially of our students' well-being and safety. And I still, for example, the Anapisi grant is very much in question now. We have, and so I think that is also like a federal grant where it is reimbursable. So if they decided to stop payment, the local university would, or the local campus would have to be considering how we manage that and what do we do, how do we institutionalize that work. But I hope that's helpful. I can't be quite as.
No, absolutely. Do you think that that website is something you could share with us,
Yes.
just so we can keep
Yes.
that monitored?
I will forward that to you.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And then, did you have a question? Because I had one more too. Then.
Well, I was just going to add to what you asked about the DEI stuff as well, from more of a legislative perspective. And this may be more of something that I need to talk with Kurt about specifically. But I was just wondering, just curious if you still pertain to that, if there were potentially any talks of like the state helping to sublet some of that. I know, again, the fund split has been a point discussed, but with federal cutting, as well for higher education, that could end up with putting more on the state to help fund a lot of this, or raising tuition, which I know is also very dangerous. So
I wouldn't be seeing the kinds of bills and policies the legislature's been producing the last couple years, and knowing that they still have a very large majority of Democrats. I would be expecting to see some bills and some conversations around protecting. Kurt will be better at knowing actually what's happening, but I would be surprised if we weren't working. I know there's a lot of work behind the scenes happening to discuss this as it's kind of coming out. And one of the worries I have, as I worked in Olympia for the Office of Financial Management for quite a few years and watched the process of budget development in the legislature, what I worry about for us is that if there are more significant penalties on all federal funding, that it's in the realm particularly of healthcare and human services and higher education's financial aid, the amount of federal funding we receive is extraordinary. So if we are dealing with real potential risks to federal funding across our entire state system, it could result in a lot of having to quickly reprioritize spending for the state. And that could result in any number of things for us, and also for all the social safety net programs that people rely on, our students included. So it's worrisome, and I will share that website with you.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Thank you.
very shortly, because I think there's a lot of helpful information there, and I'm trying to keep up on it as well. It's changing like every 2 hours.
thank you.
One final question, and then if anyone else has questions, feel free to chime in. In a more optimistic note, if the state were to agree to a higher funding split to be able to fund UW Tacoma, ideally 100%, but world of make-believe. If they did agree to a higher funding split, how would UW-Tacoma students feel that impact?
That's
Like,
a
where would
great-
that money go?
That's a great question. This is my opinion. It is not a definitive statement because we haven't reached that point to actually be certain about how the administration would proceed. I believe that would lead us to come back and I believe we'll be doing this anyway periodically as more legislative information is available, we'll be coming back and saying, here's a new reality. We have a new summary of what our reality is and ask for feedback on the decisions that are that have to be made with that new reality. So it could be a positive reality where we get additional resources, which frees up resources to invest in additional initiatives, or it could be the opposite where we see worse news and we're coming back and saying, here's the kinds of cuts that we are considering and help us think about this.
But in the event of a higher funding split, do you think it would end up more going to faculty and staff wages, or do you see that more as providing student basic needs support or being able to subsidize tuition in some kind of way?
You know, I would see it being a decision that I would see it being handled in the same way this process is, where we try to have conversations with the Budget Advisory Committee and you, but I can't say that I have assurances of how that dollar would go, say, to offset tuition costs or to more student services. I just don't know.
Okay.
But I think the process would be open, would be my opinion, my hope. But I do know there will be, regardless of the very specific element, I know we'll be continuing to keep this conversation going as the legislative session progresses.
Awesome. Any other questions, you guys?
If I could ask you all that feel comfortable offering, I think your when I leave here and I want to share with both Seattle and our chancellor, the students feel that we should really be mindful of X, Y, and Z, I'd love to get your thoughts on that.
I think when we're specifically talking about UW-Tacoma and our perspective as students at UW-Tacoma, I think there is a general perception that we kind of get, for lack of a better way of phrasing this coming to mind, kind of get the scraps sometimes. I think making sure that remembering that UW-Tacoma is still an institution that is a member of the UW system is one important factor. I think another thing too is just remembering from the student perspective of basic needs are a major factor to students completing their education as well. It's not just around tuition and students having access specifically to school. It's great for numbers of enrollment, but maintaining enrollment and graduation are also, obviously critical numbers as well that universities pay attention to. So I think remembering that, making sure students have access to food and housing as well while trying to complete their education is definitely an important factor.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, go for it.
Kind of going off of what Ben says, in our data that we collected, those issues of food safety, housing, all of that that students express they need help with, those are also reasons why someone might not, reasons why someone might not end up choosing, is that the way to, yeah, UW-Tacoma over another college. So if we're looking at enrollment rates, if those matters are not addressed, then that could inhibit growth on our campus.
If you want specific metrics in a recent survey with a 500 student sample size, have you ever felt that you needed to leave UW-Tacoma due to challenges in meeting your basic needs? 14% of our students said that they would leave if they couldn't meet their basic needs. So on top of what Ben is saying, I'm sure you know the literature, students who experience basic needs will drop out on a more consistent basis, especially our first generation, first time in college students. So while our enrollment is going up, I personally have concerns regarding retainment. I've been very optimistic regarding the work that Student Affairs has been doing to retain students, but those programs need to be continuously funded, especially as everything that's going on federally continues. So if there's one priority that Seattle needs to know, it's you need to not only continue funding our basic needs support, but it needs to be expanded if you want to genuinely support the students that are at this community serving university. Any others?
I think the last point, because it's been especially addressed in the past week, and I think it's an important note to take attention to. Funding for programs for non-citizen, specifically undocumented students on college campuses as well. Making sure that we are not just, I mean, there were reports of an ICE patrol on Pac Ave just yesterday. I think making sure that not just we're pushing back on, or we're finding, I shouldn't say pushing back, but we're finding solutions to compensate for the cutting of federal funding and stuff like that. I think it's also important to ensure that we are maintaining funding for programs that are providing a similar college experience to those students as well, because they do deserve that experience too.
Yeah.
So I think that's my last note on that.
Thank
anyway.
you so much.
If there's no further comments, I know we're 5 minutes to the end of our meeting time, so I'll close this discussion and say thank you. Thank you for coming and answering all those questions for us.
Thank you so much for your feedback, and thanks for making time for me. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, and Holly, I'll email you within the hour.
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
And if you ever want to come back, just shoot me an email, and hopefully I'm looking at my phone and we can just get you scheduled as quick as last time.
Thank you. That was great. All right. We'll be in touch. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, moving down the agenda to, and I just closed it instead of reopening it. Oops. Okay. Director updates, if anyone has anything they would like to share.
Annual allocations for the STFC are going to be closing next week alongside SAFC on February 7th by noon.
Which then leads me to say, I actually recently met with Holly and Moira a few days ago regarding the budget, and I do have something kind of ready to work with. And I do believe per bylaw, you guys are supposed to look at this budget. So I don't know.
Next meeting, I guess?
Yes. So I wanted to, I was like looking over bylaws, I don't know why, but then like I saw that you guys, it has to be a 2/3 vote. So maybe next meeting we can look at it before I turn in on the 7th. Sweet.
Huskies on the Hill, Monday. Today was the last in-person training. So if you did not make it to those trainings, did we send that information out, right?
After I meet with you, we'll send out an email
Got it.
to everyone who signed up for Huskies on the Hill and didn't make it to attend a virtual training over the weekend.
Yes. Yeah. So there will be a virtual training hosted by UW Bothel's legislative team on Saturday. And so if you did not make it to any of the UW Tacoma in-person trainings this week, please attend that training. This training is mandatory to attend Huskies on the Hill. So if you do not complete that training, you will not be allowed to attend. This is just, it's nothing to discriminate against students who have other priorities and stuff like that. It's mainly just to maintain information and making sure information is being passed along, as well as making sure students are properly prepared for going into these meetings with legislators and stuff like that. We also have our kickoff party tomorrow evening. So if you would like some free tacos, come and attend that. Yeah.
We have UW Tacoma alumni and Tukwila council member Armin Papperman. He was a former DOLA and president for ASUWT. He'll be coming, speaking a few words, and hopefully helping hype up students as well.
Yeah.
Did you? On the note of Huskies on the Hill, we don't have tote bags. Like, we have tote bags, but we don't have the logo on them. We have the extra tote bags from Mariah's event that we're repurposing. I know people at the Lacey Makerspace that can get us logos on them. So once I get a little bit more information, I'm going to see about pursuing that this weekend. So we can have logos on our tote bags for not too much. But if that is the route we go, I may file a form for reimbursement for whatever that ends up being. If you guys are free this weekend, please, I would very much appreciate help with getting those printed. I'm happy to drive up to Tacoma to drive people down to help getting those printed and then stuffing them with stuff. So just let me know if you guys are available.
I could probably be there. I should be able to be there.
Advisor updates.
We got squared away with transportation for Husky on the Hill. We ran into some issues with ADA accommodations, but we got those settled. Financially, we might take a hit, but that's something that we have to consider and think about moving forward. Having those accommodations readily available.
Do I need to pass any information along to students that do those accommodations?
Nope.
Okay. Cool.
Show up back.
I might even take it in.
No, I'm just saying, yeah, sorry, yeah, something like budget book.
Yeah.
Thinking of those things that moving forward, have to keep that stuff in mind.
Okay.
I have nothing other than camping Monday.
Yeah.
Great job.
I can't wait for Monday to be over so I can
Imagine
sleep.
how I feel.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. If you haven't been at the training yet, we've been saying this for the past couple trainings. It is expected to snow in Olympia on Monday. So I'm throwing that out to the public now. Be prepared. If you're driving yourself, make proper accommodations if you need to on how you're getting down there. Do not risk it. If you did sign up to drive yourself, if the roads look too bad, don't drive, and dress accordingly for weather. Although they do keep it pretty warm in the building, so keep that in mind as well.
My chair update was the tote bag situation. So if you're available, I would very much appreciate the help. With that, is there a motion to adjourn the meeting?
I motion to adjourn the meeting.
Seconded.
Moved by Moira, seconded by Ben. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion passed unanimously. I adjourn this meeting at 1:01. No, so it's like a normal